What's up, everybody? Welcome back. This is the last part of the Ancient Mysteries Iceberg. If you haven't checked out the other parts, I'll make sure that I link the whole playlist below. Other than that, I did just drop 2 other videos on the worst dictators of all time, so make sure you check that out. And other than that, man, just make sure you do all the YouTube stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend. So other than that, we getting right into it, man. Okay, so the first one up on this half of this tier was honestly the only entry on the iceberg that I really couldn't find any information for. It was the St. Thomas silver coins in India. I did find a few things, but it wasn't enough information to really do anything with. And then other than that, it was just ways to buy the St. Thomas silver coins. So if anybody can find any information, definitely link it down below and I'll make a separate video or something if I can find enough information. But other than this, we're going right to the next one to start it off. So first up is the Griffin warrior tomb. In spring 2015, the University of Cincinnati resumed its program at Pylos, directed by professors Sharon Sherry Stalker and Jack Davis. They focused their efforts on an olive grove northeast of the Nestor Palace site. The team was thrilled when masonry was discovered just below the surface. Portions of a rectangular structure nearly 8 feet long were exposed, which the team realized was a shaft tomb, a burial method practiced early in Mycenaean history. To the team's great surprise, the grave was intact. Covered by a broken slab that most likely collapsed due to an earthquake, the chamber still contained human remains and a ton of goods, including weapons, vessels, and jewels. One of the most distinctive goods inside was an ivory plaque adorned with a griffin that gave the occupant the name the Griffin Warrior. They found a ton of different bronze weapons, including a dagger, some very deteriorated armor, a helmet that was made of boar's tusks, and a long sword that was longer than 3 feet with a gold-plated hilt. Now, although the investigation is far from complete, initial analyses have determined that the Griffin Warrior was a man in his early 30s that stood somewhere in between 5 and 6 feet tall. Not very descriptive. The cause of his death is still unknown because of the poor state that his body was found. The burial reveals that, contrary to the descriptions of funerary sites in the Iliad and the Odyssey, Mycenaean funerary practices in that time consisted of burial and not of cremation. The team set about trying to place as precise a date as possible on the grave and its contents. Normally, ceramics found in such burials help archaeologists calculate its age, but this burial contained no ceramic goods at all. And that was all I really could find on the Griffin Warrior tomb. There wasn't too much information out there. If you can find anything else on it, please link it down below. Let me know. I'm interested, as always, just to learn whatever other people find out other than I do. So other than that, we're moving on to the next one. Okay, so this next entry, I swear, I thought that this was a troll. I was hoping that this was just a troll entry on here. But when you put this into Google, apparently this is a real thing. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just like out of the loop and I'm just not hip, but the next entry up is, where is Jesus's foreskin?
No! God, please, no! No! No!
Questionable, but apparently a lot of people want to know. So anyways, let's get into it. According to the New Testament, Jesus, who was born a Jew, was ritually circumcised at 8 days old. What happened to his foreskin? That mystery is the subject of PhD candidate James White's doctoral thesis titled Ring of Flesh, the late medieval devotion to the holy foreskin, and David Farley's book, An Irreverent Curiosity, in the search of the church's strangest relic in Italy's oddest town. Now, throughout history, the holy foreskin has reportedly been held in various places. There were likely more than a dozen false foreskins circulating. Basically, tons of places had just random foreskins that were not Jesus's.
Why the fuck would you do that?
One of these alleged foreskin relics arrived in Rome around 799 AD when King Charlemagne presented it as a gift to Pope Leo III. Now, just imagine getting that as a gift. Like, it's your birthday and your boy pulls up on you, you open up this box, and that's what you get. Are you happy? I'm just confused at that point. I got a bunch of questions off the rip. Where'd this come from? How did you get it? Why are you giving this to me? Why did you think I would like this? Like, what happened to gift cards? You feel me? It remained in the papal Sanctum Sanctorum reliquary until the sacking of Rome in 1527. The invasion left half of the population dead, and many sacred relics were stolen or destroyed. The holy foreskin, along with a piece of the Holy Cross, was said to have been discovered about 30 years later in the village of Calcutta, just north of Rome. The church that housed the holy foreskin is called the Chiesa del Ses, the Nome de Gesù, or the Church of the Holy Name, which is a reference to Jesus' circumcision and naming day. Every January 1st, the local priest would lead a procession around the village with the holy relic held high. Now, under pressure to banish the Catholic Church practices that could be seen as culturally backward, the Vatican issued a decree in 1900 threatening excommunication to anyone who wrote about the holy foreskin.
I will not tolerate such behavior. Either shut up and get out.
In 1983, just a few weeks prior to the January 1st Feast of the Holy Circumcision, the local priest went to check on the relic, but it was missing. Some suspected that the local priest had given it back to the Vatican. Others believes that it was stolen by Satanists, of course. The truth is that no one knows where it ended up, and personally, I'm not really worried about this dude's foreskin. If you are, I hope that you end up figuring out the answer to where it is, but hey, it's crazy to me that this many people actually cared about this. Like, I really thought this was a troll. I thought this was one of those just fake entries on this, but goes to show you what you really know. Anyways, we're moving on to the next thing. Up next is Apollonius of Tyana. Born at Tyana in Asia Minor, Apollonius was educated at Taurus and at the temple of Asclepius of Aegea, where at 16 he devoted himself to the doctrine of Pythagoras, whose teachings he followed for all of his life. In his quest for further knowledge, he traveled to eastern countries and, according to legend, performed miracles wherever he went. Apollonius was said to have warned the citizens of Ephesus of an impending plague, but they all ignored his warnings until the pestilence struck. Remembering his prophecy, they sought further advice of the man they thought to be a mighty magician, who revealed that there was a wretched beggar among them, who should be stoned to death. After the deed was done, the people removed the pile of stones under which they thought the beggar laid. However, they only found a black dog, which Apollonius explained was the actual cause of the entire plague. Apollonius is also said to have stopped one of his former students, Menipus of Corinth, from marrying a vampire. Apollonius appeared as a guest at the wedding festivities before the banquet. He then made all the banquet amenities and even some of the guests disappear, proving that they must have been an illusion created by the evil bride. He then made the young woman confess to her true identity, thereby rescuing Menipus from a terrible fate on his wedding night. Another recounting has an Indian magician making 7 rings representing the 7 planets and giving them to Apollonius, who wore a different one each day. The legend has it that this enabled him to maintain his youthfulness well into old age, with his living reportedly to 100 years old. Especially back then, that's crazy. There is also a mystery surrounding Apollonius' death. Some reported that he fell out of favor with Emperor Severus, who put him on trial and had his hair cut off to eradicate his magical powers. Then Apollonius simply vanished from the courtroom, never to be seen again. Although his followers insisted that he died, they nonetheless think that he made it into heaven. Meanwhile, Philostratus related several other versions of Apollonius' death, including that the sage of Tyana vanished in the temple of the goddess Tyana. Apollonius had continued to exert significant influence throughout the centuries. Coins were struck and statues erected commemorating him, and in Tyana a temple was built and dedicated to him. Basically, they're still fucking with him even to this day, so word to him. But we're moving on to the next one. Okay, so up next is Asherah. Asherah, along with Astarte and Anath, was one of the 3 great goddesses of the Canaanite pantheon. In Canaanite religion, her primary role was that of the mother goddess, and in mythological texts from the late Bronze Age, she's mentioned of a city-state of Urugrit. She is called the creatress of the gods. Her consort at Urugrit is the god El, and he's called the creator. El is also referred to as father and the patriarch at Urugrit, whereas Asherah is called mother, and their children form the pantheon of the gods, who some say are more than 70. A Hittite myth similarly mentions the 77 and 88 children of Asherah, so it kind of confirms more than 70 kids. Ugaritic and other Canaanite materials further associate Asherah with lions, indicating power, serpents representing immortality or healing, and sacred trees signifying fertility.
Fun fact: Asherah snake on a stick representing healing is where we got the snakes for the universal medical logo.
So there's basically a ton of different symbols that basically relate back to Asherah, and she was the creator goddess or god, whatever. But anyways, if you're interested, I would suggest looking into it yourself. It's a ton of different information on her children, all of this, it all relates back to itself. So anyways, moving on to the next thing. Up next is the Cromlech of Almendres. Located on the slopes of the Monte dos Almendres in Portugal is the ancient megalithic site of Almendres Cromlech, also popularly known as the Hill of the Stone and Morphe. The stunningly well-preserved site is the most important megalithic arrangement in all of Portugal and is also believed to be one of the oldest stone circles throughout all of Europe. Almendres Cromlech, locally known as Cromlech dos Almendres, is located close to the city of Évora in the Alentejo region of Portugal. Despite being just a short distance from Évora, transport to the site is difficult, making it an unpopular destination for tourists. Consequently, this special site remains free and open to the public at all times. No fences or ropes keep visitors back, and it is possible to freely wander around the site and even touch the stones. A rare experience if you know what all these historical sites that I've been talking about is. Mostly they're roped off and they're all tourist locations. Almendres Cromlech is not just any megalithic site. Consisting of over 90 granite standing stones, it is the largest megalithic site in the Iberian Peninsula and is one of the largest in Europe as well. These stones are arranged in two twin circles. The ring to the east is circular in shape and the smaller of the two. It also contains the oldest stones, which have been dated to the early Neolithic period or somewhere around 6000 BC. The ring to the west, on the other hand, is elliptical in shape and is believed to have been built during the Middle Neolithic period around 5000 BC. It is believed that around 3000 BC, many of the stones were repositioned to align with the celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, and the stars. Therefore, it has been speculated that the Almendres Cromlech may have functioned as some sort of astronomical observatory. For instance, if a line were to be plotted from the solitary menhir of Almendres, which is a single granite monolith rising to a height of around 4.5 meters, to the center of Almendres Cromlech, it would point towards the sunrise on the winter solstice. Although there are trees in the way now, the independent reports that the Neolithic builders of the site would have watched the sun rise over the left-hand monolith at the midsummer and then see it move gradually over 6 months to rise over the right-hand southerly monolith at midwinter. But still, like many of these other sites that I've talked about, the exact function of Almendres Cromlech is still a mystery, and we're basically just taking educated guesses at this point. But we're moving on to the next thing. Hope you like that one. Up next is Nitocris. For the past century, the history and overall existence of Nitocris has been questioned by scholars. Even though her name appears on the Turin Kings list of Egyptian monarchs and is also mentioned by Manethello in his list of 6th century Egyptian monarchs and by Eratosthenes of Cyrene in his Theban list of Egyptian monarchs, basically nobody can prove that this person was ever actually alive. Flavius Josephus references Herodotus' story in his Antiquity of the Jews, Book 8, Volume 6, calling her Nikaole, and does not question the authenticity of the tale. Eratosthenes' mention of Nitocris is also known through the work of Apollonius of Athens, which is cited by Seneculus in his selection of chronography. Still, because there is no physical evidence of this queen, no inscriptions, no monuments, no tomb, nor any later reference to her, some scholars have claimed that her name is simply a scribal error of that of the last king of the 6th dynasty, Nitocris Sipta.
Is nothing but a tragic mistake.
Recently, however, an increasing number of Egyptologists and scholars have come to accept that Herodotus' account may have some basis in fact, and Nitocris is increasingly being recognized as the queen of the region of Egypt and the last monarch of the Old Kingdom. The underlying reason for this new evaluation of Nitocris is unclear, but may have to do with the kind of evidence first presented by the Egyptologist Percy E. Newberry, who argued that Nitocris was an actual Egyptian ruler and not just a character in a fable repeated by Herodotus, and that her history should be accepted. Although Herodotus' account of Nitocris is often cited as the only evidence of the queen in all of history, so if you want to believe she's real, you can. There's not really any real evidence for it though, so just in case. We're moving on to the next one though. Up next is the Lost Roman Legion in Liqian. The legend begins in 53 BC with the Battle of Carrhae between the Roman general Marcus Licinius Crassus and the Parthian general Surena. Carrhae was the location near the modern-day Syrian and Turkish border. In antiquity, it was near the fringes of the Roman Empire in the west and the Parthian Empire in the east. Crassus was already one of the wealthiest men in the Roman Republic, but he had a desire to access the wealth of the Parthians, so he convinced the Senate to let him lead 42,000 Roman soldiers into the battlefield against the Parthians. In the battle, Crassus and his army suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of Surena and his 10,000 archers. Crassus attempted to negotiate a truce, but was killed in the process. According to legend, liquid gold was poured down his throat as a punishment for his greed. He was also allegedly beheaded and his body was desecrated. they did work on this man. Like, they poured gold down his throat to shut him up. Like, that's some new levels of fucked up. I'm not even gonna hold you. Like, wow.
Why didn't you just shoot this asshole?
Kind of blows my mind. Like, damn, you wasted gold on that. Of the surviving Roman soldiers, 10,000 of them were captured alive by the Parthians. According to some accounts, they were relocated to the eastern border of the Parthian Empire. It is Parthian custom to send prisoners of war captured in the west to the far east to secure their loyalty against their eastern rivals. 17 years later, in 36 BC, on the western border of the Han Chinese Empire, the Battle of Jiji was fought between the Chinese and the Huns, a classical enemy of China. Mercenaries fighting on the side of the Huns, who used a fish scale formation. The Chinese description of the fish scale formation used by the mercenary soldiers bears a vague resemblance to the testudo formation practiced by the Roman legions. This has led to the popular theory that these mysterious soldiers were in fact exiled Roman legionaries from the Battle of Carrhae, who had hired themselves out as mercenaries for the Huns. This idea was first suggested by the historian Homer Dubs. The fish scale formation impressed the Chinese, and they invited the soldiers to come back to China and become a part of the border guard in the modern Gansu province. A city and country were also made for them, which were named Liqian or Lijian. Dubs argued that some of the soldiers in exile gave up trying to go back to Rome and instead hired themselves out as mercenaries for local warlords in the region. Some of these former Roman soldiers may have found themselves working for the Huns in their war against the Chinese. Now, proponents of this theory have searched for Liqian and believe that they have found it. Zelzaihe is a modern village near Laoshu. What is interesting about the town is that the people living there have traits such as brown hair and blue eyes, which is strictly contrasting with the appearance of most of the people in the surrounding villages. Additionally, a helmet was reportedly found with Chinese characters written on it saying, "One of the surrendered." The appearance of the villagers and the discovery of unusual artifacts has led many believers in the legend to identify Zalzehai with Liqian. Because the legend has been popularized, the town has now used it to attract tourists, even going as far as to construct Roman-style buildings and statues. Since Rome and China were aware of each other in antiquity, it was believed to be possible to travel between the two empires at the time, but the evidence is not conclusive. So basically, there's no true definite evidence of this, but it is still possible. Like, they were around at the same time, they could have traveled, it's possible. We just don't have the exact evidence yet. But anyways, moving on to up next is the Siberian Ice Maiden. In 1993, Russian archaeologists discovered an intriguing find in the Yukok Plateau near the Russian-China border. They had got information about a grave robbery. Digging at the gravesite, they stumbled upon a giant block of ice. The team, led by Dr. Natalia Polishmak of Novosibirsk's Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography, began melting the block. They found the mummified body of a 25-year-old princess known as the Siberian Ice Maiden. Polishmak and her staff found the princess even had tattoos still remaining. As the archaeologists began to melt the ice with buckets of boiling water, they discovered harnesses, saddle pieces, and a table where a meal of fatty mutton had been kept for 2,500 years. The mutton was rotting and gave a foul stench. They also discovered 6 horses in total. The marks of pickaxes on their head had indicated that they were basically executed. They were killed. Then there was only more ice. The archaeologists worked painstakingly to melt the remaining ice and at last found some sable fur. When they removed the fur, a shoulder appeared with a brilliant blue tattoo of a magnificent griffin-like creature, in the words of Polishmak. It was the body of a young woman between 25 and 28 years old. She came to be known as the Yukok Ice Princess or Siberian Ice Maiden. Polishmak's team extracted the mummified body, which was in excellent condition. The archaeologists were unable to determine the cause of death because all of her internal organs, including her brain, had all been removed. But 2 decades after her discovery, experts at the Russian Academy of Sciences have an explanation. She most likely died of breast cancer. According to the MRI scans, Dr. Andriy Liqian believes she developed breast cancer in her early 20s. The asymmetry in the MR signals from the scan, according to Dr. Liqian, shows that she had a tumor in her right breast. The disease's excruciating pain worsened over time, weakening her. It is possible that she fell off of a horse, fracturing her bones not long before her death. She was in a lot of pain and apparently relied on cannabis to help her. The presence of cannabis in her grave is proof to this. High-ranking members of the Eurasian nomadic civilizations widely used cannabis. My guys, shout out to them. The Ice Maiden's skin remained intact, embalmed with herbs, grasses, and wool, according to Dr. Polish Mac's team. The horses were sacrificed and buried alongside the princess. They dressed her in a silk top and a striped woolen skirt. As the highest ranking members of the nomadic societies wore silk, it is safe to assume that she was a princess. The Ice Maiden also had a cosmetics bag on her left hip, showing that she cared about how she looked. And tattoos, according to Polish Mac, are a symbol of beauty. At least back then, the goal was to appear to be as gorgeous as possible. Because the tattoo was visible, she placed it on top of the shoulder to basically try to be as hot as possible, you know what I mean, as attractive as she could. The Ice Maiden had tattoos on both arms and fingers, but one of her, basically the one on her shoulder was the best preserved. Because of the animal style painting, archaeologists assume the princess was of Scythian heritage, as they have discovered similar artwork in various parts of Russia, Central Asia, and Europe. People in the area believed in shamans and regard that the removal of mummies from ancient graves was a terrible omen. Basically, they think that they just gave these guys a lot of bad luck. People in the Altai region where the mummy was discovered were outraged that she was being showcased to tourists from all over the world. Basically, they hated that possibly one of their ancestors was just on display for everybody to see and basically just being used as a trophy almost, which, I mean, I could definitely see why they would be upset about that, but end of the day, I mean, this is important research. You know what I mean? You want to know the answers to some of this stuff at some point, right? I would hope so. And the reason why they were mad is because they actually took the Ice Maiden to Korea and Japan, where she was treated like a rock star, basically, where the crowds surrounding her all over the place. And basically, authorities in the area where she was originally discovered reacted by prohibiting additional excavations, and they designated the area as a zone of peace. Russian authorities also eventually returned her to an Altai museum, but they're still studying it so we can further figure out stuff from her. But anyways, moving on to the last thing about this. Finishing up this iceberg is the Yonaguni Monument. The Yonaguni Monument is an enormous underwater rock formation that covers an area of 60 by 50 meters. It was first discovered in the mid-1980s by a scuba diver who was looking to observe hammerhead sharks. And since then, pseudo-archaeologists believe that it is a monolith carved by man thousands of years ago. The Yonaguni Island area is a popular scuba diving destination. Now, divers travel to explore the mysterious Yonaguni pyramid-like structure and its surrounding artifacts. It was actually by accident that Kichichiro Arataki discovered what some scientists call the archaeological find of the century. Isn't that what they call all these finds though? He discovered the mysterious find in 1986 while diving off the coast of Yonaguni Jima, searching for a new spot to view hammerhead sharks. However, he inadvertently strayed outside of the designated safety zone. In front of him laid a massive stone structure on the ocean floor at a depth of 35 meters. He explored the monument and was in awe at how colossal it was. Due to the heavy incrustation of the coral, it was difficult to determine exactly what it was. Being curious, he kept on circling it again and again, taking pictures before finally returning to shore. Some believe that the monument is a handmade pyramid structure bearing evidence of a lost civilization. It was even referred to as the Japanese Atlantis, which kind of sounds a little crazy. Masaki Kimura spent over 15 years studying the site. He is convinced that it is man-made, suggesting that ancient people once lived where it stands. It is said to be evidence of the lost continent of Mu, long since submerged since following a severe hurricane. During his many dives to the site, Kimura gathered substantial evidence that man, not nature, formed the ancient structure. He noted several specific artificial features that supported his theory. These features include marks from tools, a retaining wall, a suggestive road, so not really, but something I guess you could say is a road, drainage canals, gates, stairways, and 2 carved monuments that were shaped like turtles. Basically, his findings concluded with, "It is hard to believe nature would have left such a clear outline." That is in his words. Now, others say that the straight edges of the monument resulted from the natural stratigraphy of sandstones. These often will look like a straight line, straight enough to be human-made. And in fact, Robert Scotch, who is a math and science professor at Boston University, shout out Boston, he even dived the site and he stated that isolated portions of it may look like they're man-made, but when you look at it in context, you see how, in this case, fine sandstone and split up along horizontal bedding planes that give you these regular features. Just like the lost city of Atlantis though, we may never know what actually happened here or how it got there, and any evidence found can only support speculation and often generates a counter argument, so there's no clear answer to this. But you know, if you ask Kimura, he swears it's man-made, and if you ask Scotch, he basically says no, this is natural processes. So believe what you want to believe. Personally, I don't really care. I hope we find out at some point, but hey, I'm not holding up about it. But anyways, all right, and that was it. That was the entire Ancient World Mysteries Iceberg, whatever you want to call it. I do have plans to do at least one more iceberg. It's the Phycological Experiments Iceberg that somebody had sent me. That one sounds dope, so I'm definitely about to start working on that. And if you haven't checked out the other videos that I just dropped, they're on the worst dictators of all time. Make sure you do that. If you got through this entire thing with me messing up words and everything, I appreciate you so much. You have no clue, bro.
You are the best.
For real, like, I appreciate it. Like, oh, I'll be stressing out over these words, but anyways, like it, subscribe it, tell a friend to tell a friend, do all the YouTube stuff that you gotta do. Yeah, new stuff coming soon. My bad for the slack. Make sure you get laid, make sure you stay dangerous. I love y'all. I'll see you later. Deuces.